Hi, everyone. My name's Christine. I'm going to be your host today. We're in the Cousin DIY studio this afternoon, and we're going to go over how to make these really cute, fashionable mama totes. So these are great just to have in your car if you're, throwing your kids stuff. Trust me, I know, like my kids hand me all of their stuff and then I have nowhere to put it. Anyway, they make great grocery bags. If you're a dog mama, that counts too. So we have a black one, and then we have the option of doing the pink one. So I will go over the materials with you. So if you want to just pan the camera down, we can start that. So for the pink bag, you'll need this pink tote. And then for the crystals, you're going to be using 2 packs of the graphite and then 3 packs of this gold ore color. I don't know if you can see it, but it's very pretty. And then you will be using the leopard print. And then on the pink bag, you'll use the black for the lightning bolt. And then for the black bag, you'll have your black Make Market tote. You'll have 2 of the gold ore nail crystals. So these are size 6, 8, and 10. 2 of the fuchsia shimmer packs. And then 1 pack of the jet AB. And then on the black bag, you'll be using the leopard with the hot pink. All right. And then also you'll want to have your glue, a crystal jewel tool to pick up the crystals with. These are a really great tool to have. They really ease the frustration level when you're, trying to pick up these tiny, tiny crystals. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So for those of you at home, there was a template that you could print out. If you do have a Cricut at home, you can use this on your Cricut machine or Silhouette machine to cut out the letters. But if you don't have a Cricut at home, we can do this just by hand. It's really very easy. It just takes a little bit of time. So we're going to go ahead and cut these letters out here. So just grab your scissors and you're just going to cut along the outline of the letter. Okay. And then for the inside of your letter, you see you have these 2 little white spaces. This is easy, just kind of fold it in half and then make a little snip. And then you should be able to cut out those centers of the letters.
I bought a Cricut a couple years ago. It was my favorite purchase ever.
I bet. I love mine. I wish I knew a little bit more about it. I feel like I can do the basics on it. All right, so due to time, I'm not going to cut this whole thing out. I have some pre-cut letters already. So this is kind of what they will look like when they're all cut out. So after you do that, we're going to take our leopard print material and you'll just kind of lay it flat. And then you're going to place your letters face down. So the black part of the print will go face down. And we're just going to use this as a template to trace around. So I'm going to grab my pen or my Sharpie and just kind of start tracing around this letter.
I love the rock style of this. Is
Mhm.
AC/DC one of your favorite bands?
It is. I even wore my AC/DC shirt today. All right. So once you take it off, you'll see there's your outline. So you'll do this on the other A as well, and you'll need 2 of the M's and 2 of the A's. So again, just remember to put the printed side down, and then you'll just trace around that. So once you get those all on, then you're going to go ahead and cut out your letters on the leopard. So again, just take your scissors and you're just going to follow the outline of your letter you just traced down. Since these are like really big blocky letters, this should be fairly easy to do by hand. Now, if you did have more of like a cursive font or something that was a lot smaller, this might be a little bit more difficult to do. But these are just so fun. It's probably one of my favorite fonts.
Is anyone following along with us today?
Where's everybody from? I'm always so curious to know where everybody is watching from. All right. So again, when you do your centers, you'll just kind of fold it in half and give it a snip. And then that will help you be able to cut the inside of the letter out.
Sharon's from New York.
Ooh, I love New York. Such a beautiful state. And if I'm going too fast, please let me know if you have any questions at all. Please feel free to speak up. I want this to be an easy process for you all so that you'll want to make more of these.
Tina's from Austin, Texas, and we have Charlene from Seattle, Washington too.
Oh, wow.
Wow, we got everybody
I
across the
know.
country. I love that.
Welcome. I'm just curious, have you all made stuff? Like, do you have a Cricut that you use, or is anyone doing this by hand by chance?
Sharon has a Cricut.
Ah, nice.
Sharon's ahead of the game.
All right, so you'll cut out both of your M's and both of your A's. And so then when you flip them over, they'll actually look like a letter. And then for the pink bag, we're going to use the black. So you'll do the same process here. Just unroll your vinyl and you'll want to do the printed side down. And again, just take your pen or Sharpie and you'll just trace around that lightning bolt.
Tina's cutting by hand and Charlene has an Aaron Joy.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, Tina, you let me know if you have any issues or if you need me to slow down, just let me know. I kind of wish I had known you could do this without a Cricut. I always just thought you kind of needed one. But if you're doing kind of something easy like this, it's definitely good to know. All right, so then again, you'll just take your scissors and you'll go ahead and cut that out. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just wondering if everybody's gonna be making one for their mom and keeping one for themselves like I am.
We were on the same train of thought. I was literally going to ask the same thing. All right, so now I have my little lightning bolt cut out, so that's what it'll look like. So now we'll go ahead and we'll iron it on our bag. And again, I apologize because I am moving a little bit quickly, only because we only have so much time. But this will be, you'll be able to watch this again on YouTube. So you can always go back and reference it if you need to. All right, so we're going to open up our pink bag here. And I'm going to take my ironing pad. Here.
I really want to get one of those.
It's funny, my grandmother gave me this probably when I first moved out because I didn't have an iron, and I've literally had it for 25, 26 plus years. Goes with me everywhere. So take your iron. I've already got mine heated up. I put it on the highest setting, which is a linen on mine, but you can use the cotton if that is your highest setting. So I just kind of like to give it a little bit of an iron to kind of get those wrinkles out. Plus it helps heat up the fabric a little bit.
Ooh, I see somebody's joining us.
Yay! All right. Has anyone taken one of our classes before? All right, so now that I kind of have my bag ironed out, I'm going to first place my lightning strike, and you're going to want to put it kind of in the center. You want to center it in between the two handles here. So I'm going to put mine about right here. I kind of like how that looks. You want to make sure you have an old cloth or an old pillowcase. You can use a piece of muslin fabric if you have it. This is an old dish towel that I use. As you can see, it's been used quite a lot, but I like it because it's very thin, so it lets the heat through without you know, really burning it. So you're going to take your iron once you have that down, and you're just going to press firmly. You're going to apply a little bit of a pressure, and you're going to keep that on there for 20 to 30 seconds, depending on your iron. You can always, if you feel it's getting too much heat, you can always take it off and, you know, see how it's looking. But I've kind of, in my attempts, I've felt that the more heat you put on it, the easier it is to kind of peel off. All right, so let's go ahead and give that a check. All right, so yeah, it should just easily peel right off. And then I'm gonna give it one more little iron before we move on. Okay. All right, so now we'll go ahead and we can place our letters on. So let's see, I'm gonna do my M, my A, another M. All right. So you can kind of move it around. If you want to see more lightning bolt, you can kind of overlap the letters a little bit. If you don't want the letters overlapping, I kind of just moved them down like this. But you can put them however you want. So now that I have my letters kind of placed where I want them, we'll go ahead and start by doing the first M and the A. So you'll just take your cloth again, put it over. And again, you're just going to apply a little bit of pressure, about 20 to 30 seconds, depending on your iron. When you're done with your project, please, if you wouldn't mind, when you post it on social media, if you could tag it with the hashtag make it with Michaels or hashtag cousin DIY, we would really love to see what you make. It's kind of my favorite part of the process is getting to see, you know, everybody's creations.
Oh, especially if you present it to your mom.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I would love to see that. I think I may keep this for myself.
Same.
But I'm sure my mom would like it too. All right, so then you can go ahead and peel off. If it doesn't peel off easily, just put the plastic back on, put your towel back on and give it a little bit more heat. And that should help it.
I love the peeling part. It's so satisfying.
I am a big fan of weeding. Although sometimes when you get those little intricate details, it becomes a little bit frustrating, but this is easy. So you're going to take your cloth and you're going to put it back over those two letters and just give it a little bit more heat. You don't have to give it a lot, but I like to just make sure that it's nice and stuck down. All right, so now we'll go ahead and we'll do our other M and A. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's good. Put my cloth back on. Apply the heat, 10 or 20 to 30 seconds. So is this anyone's very first class? All right, we'll give it a check and see how it's coming.
Karen says it's her first one.
Oh, yay. Well, awesome. So glad you joined.
Oh, we have a couple first timers.
Oh, good. That's wonderful. Thank you all for spending your Friday afternoon with me, or an hour of it anyway. Okay. So this M needs a little bit more heat, it looks like. So I'm going to put this back on. And just give it a little bit more heat. And then you should be able to pull that off. Oh, yeah, this one's not wanting to go on. Try that one more time. Does anyone have a favorite AC/DC song?
I used to do one of those Les Mills classes.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever that Dynamite song came on, it was my favorite. It was
Yeah, I
get you
bet.
pumped up.
I bet. Those are fun classes. Mine's Thunderstruck.
Oh, good one.
Since we're in the Tampa Bay area, we're a big Tampa Bay Lightning fans. And they play that at every game. All right. So when this gets heated up enough, you'll be able to pull that plastic right off. So I'm gonna put this one aside, and I have one that's already kind of cooled down. So once that's kind of cooled down, you'll be able to start putting your crystals on it. And this is the fun part. Just move this pad out of the way. All right. So we'll just go ahead and start with the pink one, since this is the one we've been working on, but I also have a black one as well that we'll, start to do once we get this one started. All right. So for the pink one, we did the Jet and Jet AB in the center on the lightning bolt. So we'll go ahead and grab our Jet AB here. And this is SKU 682731. This is actually a Hotfix SKU, but we're going to use it with glue. And then I'm just going to dump them right on top here. And it does help if you kind of flip them over a little bit. It just makes the process go a little bit faster. You don't have to do this. Totally up to you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get our glue here. And then I'm going to use my jewel pickup tool, which is this guy here. I highly recommend getting some kind of pickup tool. It just makes the project go a lot faster, a lot smoother, and you definitely won't be frustrated. Sometimes people try and use, little tweezers, and then they get frustrated and then they don't want to do the project anymore. So this will definitely help out with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in just really small areas first. I'm going to just start at the bottom and kind of work my way around the lightning bolt. So we'll just kind of start, and I start putting little dots of glue about every ½ inch or so. Okay. Don't forget to put your lid back on your glue. All right, and then you can just kind of start placing crystals. So in this Jet AB pack, you have Jet AB, and then you have regular Jet crystals. They're both really pretty. They have a lot of sparkle in them. So you can just start putting them any way you want. I'm going to put some Jet AB here.
Sharon wanted to know what glue is that?
So this is the Bead Landing Crystal Radiance glue. This is an amazing glue. It will dry completely clear. So even if you happen to put a little too much, don't worry, because it's going to dry clear. This comes with this great little pin top here. So it makes putting your glue on really very easy. It goes much smoother than if you have something with like a bigger top. But this is it here. It comes with 2 of these great little triangle trays that you can use to put your crystals in. It's a great glue.
I just added the Michael's link to the chat as well.
Thank you. So we're just gonna start by putting some crystals on our lightning bolt here. And I don't have a pattern, like I said, I'm just kind of going around the outer edge first. And then I will come back and do the inside.
Ever since I started doing these classes with you, I have been bedazzling everything.
Yes, that is what I had hoped for.
I saw my. Someone asked, I just got here a little late. Did you supplement on HTV? Heat transfer, fine.
Yes, I did use the heat transfer vinyl. The Sissix brand is the brand that I believe is the Leopard. And I think the pink and the black lightning bolts are the Cricut brand. So I got a little too much glue on that last little dot, so I'm just going to wipe it up and I'll retry. There we go. All right, so again, just start placing your crystals, just kind of work in smaller sections. That way your glue doesn't get, you know, super tacky to where your crystal doesn't want to stick that good.
Karina joined too and said that it's also her first class.
Oh, hi, welcome. Thank you for joining. All right, so I'm just going to keep going along the edge here. Has anyone crystallized anything before? I'm just curious. I feel like it's very addicting. Once you start, it's hard to stop.
Maritza says she has on t-shirts
Oh, nice.
for shirts.
Very cool. That's fun. I love doing denim jackets, putting crystals on denim jackets. I don't know what it is about denim jackets, but I just love it.
Oh, I just saw my friend's daughter who has a Little Mermaid denim jacket, and I would talk her into letting us do that.
Really?
Mhm.
Oh, so cool. Yes, that will be really cute.
So it's very satisfying.
Yes, it is. All right, so now I have my lightning bolt kind of outlined. We'll go ahead and start with the other crystals. So you're going to take your, actually, I think yes, I have graphite on here. Okay, so I'm going to use my graphite and then my gold ore in the nail sizes. So we'll go ahead and open those up, and the graphite is SKU 682769. And it's got sizes 12, 16, and 20 in it.
Donna says that she just purchased a bunch of supplies but hasn't tried yet, and she can't wait. Perfect timing. The class is perfect.
Oh, great. Oh, that's so exciting. Please, please, please post pictures of what you make, because I love to see that. I know Michael's does. So that's the most exciting part, is getting to show off your finished product and then getting to say, I made this.
And I guarantee everyone will compliment you.
Oh, 100%. And I will say, if you are giving this as a gift, I think a homemade gift is so sweet. I love a homemade gift more than I love probably a store-bought gift, because it means, you know, someone spent their time, and time is definitely something I know a lot of us don't have a lot of these days. All right, so now we're gonna kind of do some crystals in the letters. And there's not really any pattern per se. I was using kind of the jet color and the black diamond color, which is in the graphite mix, kind of in the black areas of the leopard print. And then the gold color, the nail crystals in the beige on the leopard print. So again, we're just going to start in small areas. So just put a few dots of glue down. It can be random. It doesn't, like I said, there's not really a pattern. We just want to put the gold colors and the beige on the letters. All right. So let's take this. And when you're using these little tiny crystals, this pickup stick definitely is going to help. Because these guys are sometimes so little that it's really hard to even pick them up with your finger or tweezers. And you're just going to start placing them down in your glue dots. It's kind of nice once you get like your rhythm down, then you can really go to town. Right, so I put some gold. Now I'm going to go back and do some of my graphite color mix. And again, I'm just kind of putting these in the kind of dark black areas of the print. And you're just going to do the same kind of process. Just put a couple of glue dots down, and then you'll want to go back and add your crystals to those little dots.
I love tote bags. I always bring mine to the library.
Ooh, yes.
Because when Ben wants to go to the library, we come out with like 10 books.
Yeah. That's great though. That's exactly, like you can always use one, you know?
Mhm.
I feel like I just keep one in my car at all times because you never know when you're going to need one.
Mhm.
I use tote bags for, you know, to get my groceries. I don't know if this one will be a grocery tote bag, but it's kind of too cute.
Mhm.
Then maybe I want a cute one. So as you can see, it's coming along. We're adding a little bit of our sparkle. And you can see, you know, you can see the glue around the crystal, but again, don't worry about that. If the glue dries clear, so you won't even be able to see that once you have that on. All right. So you can go ahead and just keep adding. This is kind of the process for the pink bag. And then again, you can take your jet crystals and you can go back in the center after you've gotten what you want in your letters done. And then you can just kind of fill in the center of the lightning bolt. Or if you like just the outline with the jet, keep it like that. I mean, this is your bag. So you make it how you want to make it. We've had a lot of crystallization in our house the past few days. There's a big concert here this weekend. I don't know if anybody's heard of her, you know, Taylor Swift. So we've had a lot of crystal projects for my daughter this past week.
It's so exciting.
Yes, she is very, very excited. And I'm just excited to watch her be excited.
Is this her first concert?
No, I would say this is probably her first big concert. You know, she's been to little ones.
Great tote to bring to the concert. Then you can bring all your merchandise.
Oh, yes, excellent idea. This one might be coming home with me today. Maggie, don't tell anybody that. All right. So again, it's a very, very easy process. You're just putting the gold nail crystals on the beige. Your graphite mix goes in the black of the leopard print. And then your jet AB goes in your lightning bolt. But again, it's your bag. So if you like the graphite better in your lightning bolt, you do you, boo. So just because we're running out of time and I want to kind of move on to the black bag, we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to move this out of the way for now. And we'll go and do the black bag. All right. So on the black bag, we are using 3 packs of this gold ore. So this is a little different than the gold we used on this bag. For the pink bag, the gold is the smaller size nail crystals. On this bag, we're going to be using the larger size. So this is a 12, a 16, and a 20. And this is style 682715. So you'll need 3 packs of this. And then for your lightning bolt, we're going to use this fuchsia shimmer. And this does come in the 12, 16, and 20. And it has both the fuchsia shimmer color as well as just fuchsia. It's my favorite pack. I would use it on everything if I could. All right, so we'll start with our lightning bolt first. So we'll just dump our crystals out.
Charlene says, I don't have social media. Which platform would you suggest for a beginner? I would like to be connected to the craft community.
Oh, yes, that's a good question. Do you have Facebook?
She does not have social media, but I recommend Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, I would say those two. If you can, yes, I would say those. YouTube is also a great source of information. They have really great videos. Pinterest is also awesome. And you can upload your projects to Pinterest as well. And you can tag them the same way with the hashtag Make It With Michaels and Cousin DIY. But yeah, those are all really great options to start with.
And of course, TikTok.
Oh yes, TikTok. All right, so we're going to do the same process. So we're just going to go around the outline of the pink lightning bolt. And I'm just putting dots of glue about every ½ inch, just like I did on the last one. And then you'll go back and you'll start placing your crystals.
That fuchsia color is very pretty.
Oh, it's my favorite. I think if I could bedazzle everything in this color, I would. But my husband may not like that.
Have you ever bedazzled anything for your husband?
No, but I should. I'd like to bedazzle the deer heads in my office that are his, but
Oh, that would be so awesome.
he might not like that.
Inspired by me.
All right, so, oh, I missed one. Got one more to do. And these are Austrian crystals, so they're just a wonderful grade of crystal. They have so much fire in the cuts of them. The facets are really what makes the light in these shine. You're not going to find a better quality crystal than this.
I can't tell which bag I like more. They're both my favorite.
I know, right?
Does anyone else have a favorite between the two?
Yeah, it is. What color bags are you guys making? That's a really good question.
Oh, we have some upcoming classes to look forward to.
Yes, that's right. Our next class is going to be in June, what, June 19th? Or sorry, May. I've got June on the brain. May 19th. And we're going to be making a really cute bedazzled pride hat that you can wear all month long. Super cute. All right, so now I'm just going to go and I'm going to start filling in my center of my lightning bolt. Oops. Got a little bit too much glue there.
Charlene, when you do end up signing up on a social media platform, I hope you find us and follow us at Cousin DIY.
Yes, please.
We have weekly projects and lots of great material, especially for beginners. Is the glue being used washable?
It is washable. I would recommend hand washing, and that goes really for anything that you've crystallized. You put so much work into it, you don't want to, you know, throw it in the washing machine and then have your crystals fall off. So yes, they are washable. However, I would recommend hand washing, or if you do have to put them in the wash machine, turn it inside out and then do it on the gentle cycle. You know, and that goes with for any clothing or, you know, accessory that has embellishment on it. All right, so I'm going to move on to doing the letters. So it's going to be the same kind of technique as if you did on the pink one. So just go ahead and cut open one pack of your crystals. And then we're just going to do the same process. So on this, I kind of kept just inside kind of the beige part of the print. But again, if you like it in the little spots, you do that. This is your creation. So we're just going to start by putting some glue dots down.
Michael's has great everyday low prices on these crystals too.
Yes, they are on sale right now for $4.99, which is a great price, especially for Austrian crystals. All right, so now that I have some glue spots down, I'm just going to start placing some of my crystals. And again, I'm just keeping them in the beige part, but if you like them, you know, in the spotted part, you do that. So now that we've kind of gone through the kind of process here, does anyone have any questions that I can help to answer? And again, the link will be provided to you so that you can go back and rewatch it if you want to or need to. And please, please, please give us some feedback. If there's projects you would like to see that you would like to learn how to do, just let us know. We're definitely open to providing any kind of project we can for you. All right.
Sharon wanted to know what is your email? Yeah, I can and somebody also asked, what font did you use for the letters?
Oh, that is a good question. I believe the font is called Iron Maiden. Don't quote me on that though. I can go back and take a look. But there is a printout that's provided in the class handouts, which when you print it out, it'll look like this if you need it. But we can certainly find out the font name for you and put it in the link in the comment section.
And Sharon, I'll send you a message with an email that you can send to.
Yes.
For Cousin DIY.
All right. And then, so that's kind of the process for the black tote bag. One last step. So on the pink one, we did an outline of the letters. You can do that on the black, but you would have to do it with an actual fabric paint and a paintbrush. On the pink bag, we were able to use a fabric pen. which again, this is just personal choice. You don't have to do this, but you can see on this one, we kind of did the outline of the letters just to kind of give it a little bit more pizzazz. But I mean, we have crystals, so we have a lot of pizzazz already. But to do this, you're just going to take a black fabric paint marker. And you're just literally going to trace around the letters. So I just kind of start at the bottom here. Make sure you guys can see. And I just kind of create those outlines using the text that I have down. But again, if this is just personal choice, if you don't like the look of this, don't do it.
I think the font is called Squealer.
Oh,
I found it on a free font downloader and I will add it to the chat.
thank you. Perfect. Well, I really appreciate everyone listening in today and watching. Again, please, please, please post your projects with the hashtag make it with Michael, excuse me, and Cousin DIY. We just love seeing everyone's projects. Again, it's kind of our favorite part at the end to see what you've made. Give us a like and a follow. Like Maggie said, we have a ton of other videos on our Cousin DIY webpage, some really great kids projects, some jewelry projects. And again, if you have any questions at all or any feedback for this tote bag, please don't be afraid to let us know. We love to hear the feedback, what you like, what you didn't like. If there's projects in the future you want to see, we definitely want to know because we want to make what you want to see. And so that's how you do the outline here. You're just kind of following the outline that you already have. All right, so that's the basic technique for these tote bags. If you want any additional information, please reach out, comment in the video once that's posted, and then we will definitely make sure to get that information to you. I do appreciate everybody coming today and spending an hour of your time with me and Maggie, and hope you all have a great weekend. And please show us your bags that you make. We really want to see them. So thanks, everyone. Bye.